Today's video is all about tires. Tires are to scooters and bikes what shoes are to canicross runners. They really need to fit you and your trails, and they're extremely important for fun, safety, and speed. Off-road riding has irregularities in the trail surface that paved roads and smooth bike paths don't have. So it's important to get a lower tire pressure dialed in to get the smoothest ride and to get the best braking and cornering traction that you need for mushing. So if you've been following along with my From a Musher's Perspective series, you're going to start noticing that even if the direct topic isn't brakes and braking technique, that it all ties back into braking to help you stay under control for mushing. And tires and tire pressure are a really big thing for that because they are your direct connection to the ground, and that's what's allowing you to be able to brake no matter the power that your brakes have. And it also will help smooth out the ride for you and transmit less jerks and bumps to you and to the dog. Before we jump right into finding the right tire pressure, something I was really bad at putting off and making excuses for not doing at first is what some like to call the OS kit. I'll let you figure out what that stands for. But you don't just need these things sitting at home. You need to be able to bring them along to the trail with you so that you can deal with a flat tire while you're on the trail. Because riding flat can ruin a rim or a tire that still had life left in it. And walking back with excited dogs is not fun. So find a spot to carry a spare tube. Mine just wedges right up in here. Electrical tape can be a great thing to just tape it onto your frame if you don't have a good mounting spot for it or don't want to carry it in your pack. You'll also need some tire levers. They break sometimes, so spares are good. And I have some of my tires run tubeless, so this little tool is these little pieces you can see in here are a tubeless plug patch kit. I've also got some cement and a regular type patch kit in there as well. All these things fit in this tiny little container plus more, so there's not really a good excuse not to bring it along with you and be prepared. And you'll also need some kind of inflator. You can use a CO2 inflator with replaceable cartridges. I prefer to just keep a pump on the frame. This one on my bike here mounts right to a bottle cage, so that's a great way to bring it along without any extra hassle. And it can also take a water bottle too if you don't strap your tube there as well. So that's a really handy way to carry your pump along on the trail. So if you're like me and you're thinking, well, I've got to be capable of changing a tire, but I don't know if I want to do that out on the trail. The thing is, if you run on a flat tire, it can damage the rim when you're rolling over things, and it can also be really rough on the tire. You may not have ruined the tire when you got the flat, but if you ride it all the way back to the trailhead, it very well could be toast by the time you get there. So this is what I would suggest. If you need to get comfortable with changing tires for whatever kind of rig that you're riding, prep your dog's food, put it right up on the counter where they can see it, yeah? Don't let them get to it, and change your tire. It's good practice. And especially if your hands are really, really cold at the time, it'll be the perfect simulation for how it'll go on the trail, and it'll help motivate you to watch a few more videos and do a few more test runs at home when you're more comfortable. So back to tires and tire pressure. How do you find the right tire pressure for you and the trails that you're riding? Well, what you're aiming for is going to be a tire pressure that is pumped up enough so that you're not going to hit a solid object on the trail and have your tire bottom out against the rim and pinch your tube and pop it. That's called a pinch flat, and like I said about the anxious, excited dogs and wanting to go, 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 you don't want to have to change a tube tire on the trail if you don't have to. So you want to avoid that, so you need enough air to avoid that. But also what you want is a low enough tire pressure, especially as the trail surface is more irregular. If there's rocks or roots or things you're going over, or even braking bumps and water runoff damage on gravel roads, you want to be able to have the tire conform to those surfaces somewhat so that it doesn't break your momentum as much for the sake of you riding and for the feedback that the dog is getting through the gangline. As you're riding and experimenting with tire pressures, pay attention to that feeling. It's not going to amount to as much as really good suspension would, but just see if you can notice and feel how different tire pressures are smoothing or not smoothing the trail surface for you, and you'll be able to dial in just the right pressure so that while yes, you will have more surface area of the tire contacting the ground with a lower tire pressure, you'll still have less rolling resistance at pressures much lower than appropriate road pavement pressures when you've got it aired down to just the right amount so that that tire can conform to the things that you're hitting on the trail. See that right there? Moves and flexes and grips. That's what you're looking for. Some of the factors that affect what pressure is best are the total weight supported by the tires. So the bike, the rider, plus all the water, spares, and tools you're carrying with you. The tire diameter is also a factor. Tire volume, which usually correlates with width, will affect what tire pressure you need. Sidewall stiffness, also referred to as the casing, has an effect, and tubes or tubeless setup. So in other words, sorry, I can't give you a number or a perfect formula to spit out your exact number. Don't be surprised if you're running more than 20 psi, but also don't pump them up to 30 or 40 psi and never experiment with lower pressures. This last point won't apply to all wheels, but we really need to talk about tubeless setup too. It's really becoming pretty universal in mountain bikes today, but it's not available for all rims or all tire options, and a lot of mushing rigs like the scooter with the smaller wheels or others that aren't used year-round, that just won't be a price point priority for those to have tubeless ready rims and tires. But let's just talk about what they are and what the benefits are if you do have that available to you on your bike or scooter or rig. So what tubeless tires means is that you don't have to put a tube in it. There's sealant inside and it stays liquid for quite some time. And if there's ever any kind of smaller puncture in your tire, that fluid, as it's rolling around in there, will plug it up and it will seal it as it dries, and you don't have to do anything. You can roll over some things like thorns and things and never know you hit it. Whereas with a tube in there, you would pop the tube and you're going to be on the side of the trail with dogs frantic to keep going, and you can't go until you take the wheel off, change out the tube, get it all back together again, and get going. So with tubeless, if you are unlucky enough that a puncture doesn't seal right away, you have the option of that tubeless patch kit that I talked about in the OS kit. And if that is still not enough to plug the hole, or you've lost the seal here at the bead of your tubeless ready rim, you can still always just throw a tube in it and keep on going. So it's a really great time saver for most people out on the trail if your tires are set up that way. So I'd encourage anybody that has a more modern bike, check and make sure that if you have the option of tubeless ready rims, that you're using tubeless ready tires and you're set up that way, because it really is something you can learn to do yourself at home usually. Something that you'll want to consider, whether you're using tubes or tubeless sealant inside to seal your tires and keep the air in them, is that either one of them, you can't just set it up and use that as an excuse to never ever take the wheel out of the frame and take the tire off and check things out in there, because tubeless sealant will eventually dry up and then it won't be liquid to slosh around and fill any punctures that you might get in your tires to keep you rolling without even noticing it on the trail. And with tubes, they will get old, and you inflate them, you deflate them, they sit around in the garage, and they can eventually develop thin spots that will bulge out on one area of the tube, and that's just ripe for a flat when you're out on the trail and least suspecting it. So that's something to keep in mind too. Think of that as a good excuse to practice getting your wheels in and out of your frame, whether it's a tooled through axle or you've got quick release style, or even if you've got bolts on there. You'll need to be familiar with how that goes if something does go wrong enough on the trail that you need to take off the wheel and put in a tube anyway. So it's a good thing to practice. It's still really hot here for us, and we can't get started on our mushing season yet. But I hope some of you out there are already off and running and starting to incorporate some of these tips and information into your mushing, or that you've got someone to share it with and help us all get off to a great start.